Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're watching the world. My name is Sean Driver. This is the Red Horde, and it's another hors d'oeuvre where we talk about the off-pitch stuff that affects the club on the pitch. And this time we're talking about the KOP. Often talked about, but one of the things that I didn't understand is exactly where we sit with the conditions. I've heard on Twitter this week that there was confirmation that there were, once the go-ahead went, we'd be 3 months until we started going. And I wanted to know, what's the hold up? Who holds the ball? Why aren't we moving forward? And how long do we think we'll have to wait? I don't know the answer to the latter one, but I know some of the information, so stay tuned. Let's get into it. This is the Red Horde. We're talking the KOP. Let's go. Going to jump right into this one, and what I normally like to do is give the conclusion early on in the process, but there is just way too much involved with this process. There are a total of 6 different applications that have been brought, 17 conditions that have been provided by Wrexham County Borough, many of them from other government entities, whether that be the Welsh Government, whether that be Public Services, whether that be Welsh Water, Natural Resources Wales, all of those entities saying, hey, we got to worry about groundwater, we got to worry about contamination, you got to give us details of a traffic plan, all that sort of stuff. And what I've done is I wanted to try to assess, okay, what are the nature of the conditions? What conditions are outstanding, and what conditions are sort of down the road, future looking, to basically answer the question of what is left that Wrexham has to take care of before we can start. So let's talk assumptions, because there's a lot of things that this video is not going to do. I'm not going to be doing a deep dive into the statutory regime because that's just too large for me to look at. I'm not going to look into necessarily the scope of any of the third parties and what they are about, who they're about, that sort of thing. I'm just basically looking at who said that they had authority to give instruction on a certain condition, what instructions have they given, what permissions have been granted, and what's left. There are a lot of documents involved here. It is possible that there are things that I have glossed over. One perfect example is with Condition 8. There has been no application to remove Condition 8 or to modify Condition 8, but in one of the documents, it says that Condition 8 has been dealt with. And also, there may be others that have been discussed publicly that I missed in the documents. It's possible. I tried my best to catch them. All of these documents are in publicly available documents from the Wrexham County Borough. I'll put the link below, and I'll also end up trying to break down exactly where things are so that that can facilitate you trying to find them. So let's jump into it, and we're going to look at the application timeline. So this process all started with an application that was delivered August 15th of 2022, P20220725. I'll put the link down below. That's the main one. It has 55 documents out of a total of 101. It includes a lot of photographs and a lot of drawings, and I'm going to pull some of those because if we're talking about the KOP, we got to see what it's going to look like. And there are some sexy features that I'm going to put them out there, let you enjoy them because I know I enjoyed looking at them. But 55 documents go out, and the process that ended up happening is you had all of those third-party government organizations step up and say, hey, these are the concerns that we have. This is what you need. You've got to have certain, deal with the pilings, deal with the facade, deal with the landscaping, the transport, all those sorts of things. And they all formed 17 conditions. All right. Some of those conditions are forward-looking as the process goes on. Some are even post-occupation. Some of those are those that had to be done prior to construction beginning. And those are the ones that I'm interested in to find out exactly where we are and where the holdup may potentially be. We get some guidance. The second application came May 17th, 2023. That was to remove conditions 5, 6, and 10. And I'll go through those later. Don't worry. I'll spell out all these conditions and we'll talk about exactly what they are. I'm just giving the timeline. That one had 11 documents. And that's the one that I'm worried about because it still reads as pending on the website. And that's been pending since July 21st of 2023. One of those has been substantively dealt with. The other 2 are silent. I haven't found anything on it, no movement, and those are primarily the 2 that we'll talk about. That's Conditions 5, Conditions 10, and Condition 6, Part 4. In any event, May 17th, 2023, application P2023/0248. That was to vary a condition. Largely what it said is the Condition 7 originally said that it had to be prior to development, and this now says prior to occupation. So there's some things that have been bumped down the timeline. They then jumped into an application June 7th, 2023. That's P20230325. That was to discharge condition number 11. Condition number 11 has to do with the infiltration of surface water drainage into the ground. There is a decision out there that came out September 25 of 2023 that says it is the application was granted. That was for details that came out following 3 different documents that came out, some drawings, some interpretive land report, a drainage strategy report. Those have been accepted. I understand that to mean that condition 11 is discharged. It may not be in its entirety. I don't see a reference there, but for our purposes, we're going to say that it's been granted and they've dealt with that issue. Following that, the one that's got the most media attention recently, that was to remove condition 3. That was the capacity restriction. Originally it came out that said that you could only have up to 4,900 people that could be in the stands. Obviously the KOP is planned to hold 5,500. They applied to do a non-material change back in September 22, 2023. That decision date came out in October and they basically said, hey, this is the wrong process, come back. And so the Wrexham AFC did that and applied again, and that decision came out. They were allowed to expand to go to full capacity during football matches once this is done because the phosphate issue had been dealt with. So that's the application timeline. Now we get the magic to look at the conditions and some of the specificity behind them. Yeehaw. You know what? No, let's stop. Now, talking about those conditions, I anticipate it's going to be a little bit boring. So before we get into them, let's talk about and let's show off what this KOP is going to look like, because it is a glorious building when you look inside of it too, just where the drawings are, some of them. It has some pretty cool features. I'm stunned by it. I'm excited for the locals in Wrexham. This is going to be something else, right from top to bottom, the design components, everything. Anyway, I'm just going to talk about these briefly as the pictures come up. I'm not going to focus on them too much. They're out there. They're in a document called the Wrexham Proposal Design and Access Statement. I'll try and post a direct link down below. It's in the first application that went out. It's one of the very first documents that went out publicly. And you can see a photo of the KOP looking towards the university, sort of the tech end, from Crispin Lane, looking sort of kind of to the northwest. This photograph here is the KOP from the other way, looking, I guess, to be positioned in the southwest, looking towards the northeast, down Mold Road towards Crispin Lane, the train station, and otherwise. Then this one closer up, this is going to be from the northeast, looking towards the southwest. And this photograph as well, just sort of a different location, but same sort of area up on that northeast corner. This is from the inside. There's really 3 different floors that are going to be contained within the KOP. You've got your concourse level, and you can see the 3 different features that are down here. You've got the kiosks, the bathrooms up at the front. You've got the store for the Wrexham AFC is going to be in that purple area over in the corner. But the fascinating one is, can you see the beer wall? What is a beer wall? I mean, I want to go to a stadium that has a beer wall. Like, do you lick the wall? Do you order from the wall? Is it just where they've got coolers behind it and you can walk in and, like, I don't know. Beer wall sounds amazing. I want to know what it looks like. Once I know what it looks like, I want to know what your liquor laws are and whether you can just go up and pull a stout and pay some money and get it. That'd be awesome. Beer wall. Every stadium should have one. KOP has one. Good. That's awesome. The next one, heading up one floor, they call it the first ground, but it's, I guess, the second level. This one has office space. I'm assuming that's for the club's use, but it's there on the second floor. The second floor, they call it, which is really the third floor, concourse, first floor, second floor. The concourse, or the second floor is there, and it's got hospitality lounges and stuff like that. That's this space that is part of condition number 4 that we'll get into later. And then you've got this side view that says you can see the concourse in yellow, you can see the offices in blue, you can see the hospitality space that's there. It's beautiful. It's gorgeous. That's all I got to say. Here's some other pictures. I'm not going to get into them. You know what you're looking at basically is these are all photographs from that same proposal, and it is stunning. Let's get into the conditions. As I jump into these conditions, one of the things to just keep in mind is by no means am I saying that this is all-encompassing, fully thoroughly checked, all the due diligence has been completed. Let's call this a discussion piece. If you know something specific about these conditions, if you know details where there's been conditions that have been approved that I've missed, anything like that, this is just, I haven't seen a wholesome attempt at a summary, so I'm going to try to provide it. I am certain I'm going to miss a couple of components, and so you can chastise me if you wish. That's cool. Or you can provide the answer, and that would be awesome. Put them in the comments down below, and let's get into it. 17 conditions as a byproduct of the first application, and we're going to start with them, and I'm going to try to group them into 5 different categories. Those that are for the future, those are that are simply must-haves or matter of course events that have to take part during construction. Those that are resolved conditions where there has been approval that has been granted at some point during the process. Those that I suggest are optional for the future, we'll just take them as they are for now, and we'll worry about them down the road when we have a record and we understand exactly how things are working. And then finally, those outstanding conditions. The important part, what do we got to do? And so let's jump into it. The first one, commencement date, and it simply reads within the white document. And I'll bring that white document up here just quickly to have a look at it. It is a long one. I'll try and put a link down below so you can find a version of it and you can follow along. There's more language to it than what I'm just summarizing here. Maybe I'll bring them up on the screen as I go through it. We'll see how this goes. Condition number 1, the commencement date simply provides that the development hereby be permitted shall be commenced before January 12, 2028. I've seen other versions that say within 5 years, but I'm not really going to focus on this one because, God, I hope it gets going before 2028. If it doesn't. So we're going to take that one and we're going to march that one up and put it on screen as a for the future obligation because we don't have to worry about it now to get started. Condition number 2, basically an obligation to follow submitted plans. And it provides that the development shall be carried out in strict accordance with the following plans. And I'm not going to list them all here, but there are a whole raft of documents that are contained in that very first application. They have really long, unique numbers, WRX, AFL, Z400, DRA 20110, and they just continue to go on like that. Basically, it's saying, hey, we've looked at these plans. We approve those plans. You better follow these plans. That's the end of it. That is a must during construction. Not going to focus on it. We'll just categorize it and put it here. The third one on the list, capacity restriction. This is the one that, remember, had the most attention. It provided that the number of spectators using the development shall not exceed 4,900, and that applies to both football and non-football events. That condition had to deal with phosphate issues. That's been now dealt with, and so we're going to put that under resolved conditions. It's done. Hooray. Number 4, game day use restriction. I'm going to put this, before I tell you what it is, in the optional in the future area. And that's because this states it. No part of the space is referred to as concourse exhibition on this drawing or hospitality lounge on this drawing shall be used at any other time than when football matches and other sporting events are held at the racecourse. So concerts, social events, renting it out, whatever events that could end up coming where you've got a hospitality space that you want to end up using, the Wrexham County Borough has said no. You're not allowed to use that space. That's one that, we take it for what it is, get the football stuff going, and then we can always revert back and say, hey, we've got this gorgeous space. We want to be able to use it for whatever purposes. We've checked whatever the concerns are, phosphate levels, sewage, whatever. Transportation, transit issues, safety issues, we can deal with it. So let's put that down the road, optional in the future. Don't have to worry about it right now. Now for the ones that we do have to worry about, and these are the outstanding precondition, the construction plan. And it basically provides no development shall commence until a construction method statement has been submitted to and approved in writing by the local planning authority. The statement shall provide for, and it provides hours of working, parking of vehicles, loading and unloading. I will say that document appears to be in the materials. What I do not see, and why I'm a little bit perplexed, is as to why that has not been approved. I will get into, when I start talking about some of these matters a little bit more in detail, whether it has to do with one of the third-party entities that appears to be, I don't want to say more obstinate because they have a mandate, but that may be holding it up in part of the explanation as to where things are at. We'll focus on conditions 5, 6, and 10, with those being the 3 problem areas, once we finish this summary right here. The next one on the list, the pre-contamination plan, that's another one that's on the list. It says no development or phase of development, so we can't even start, shall commence until the following components of a scheme to deal with risks associated with contamination on the site are dealt with. So this is soil, land, contaminants, and the protection thereof. That one's still outstanding. There are 4 different subparts to this, and you will see that 3 of them have resolved and 1 of them have not. We'll focus on them a little bit more, so I won't get into those details here because it's interesting when you start to read the letters as to where things are potentially at. Talking about condition number 7, that's one that has been largely dealt with. I've marked it and put it under future for the future use, but it is something that changed. The original It said prior to commencement of the development that you had to provide a report demonstrating completion of the works as set out as approved, and a remediation study, a remediation strategy that had to be submitted and approved. That's been changed as a consequence of one of the applications to now be prior to the first use of the development. Basically the same as prior to occupation. I don't know why there was a change in the words. We saw it in the letter from Savills prior to occupation. Instead it went prior to first use. Occupation, I guess, comes before first use but in any event, it's so close in the timeline, I don't know why the change. But in any event, that one's been dealt with. That's future looking, so we'll put that up in the box in that category. The next one, category number 8. This one's fascinating because I only found that it was changed as a consequence of correspondence from Angela Guy, who's a staffer with the Wrexham County Borough, in a correspondence May 31st, 2023. What Condition 8 provides is that prior to occupation and operation, you have to have a long-term monitoring plan for land contamination. So this is future looking. This is to make sure, protect the soil, protect the land, and all those sorts of things. That was struck, as I said, May 31st, 2023 by Angela Guy in dealing with the application to discharge conditions 5, 7, and 10. And I'll bring that up here, and it basically says it's not necessary based on the findings of the assessment to date. So it is a resolved condition, even though we didn't ask for it. Let's take it and let's move on. Done. Discovered contamination. This one's really easy. If you find a problem during construction, shut down the construction, and it's going to have to be dealt with. So that is a must during construction, and something that we hope to avoid. And I don't want to hear about that ever again. Next one. Foundation piling plan. This is before we put anything into the ground, foundation, piling, or otherwise, that you have to have designs for those penetrative methods that are sufficient to end up saying there's not going to be an issue with the groundwater. That is still an unresolved issue. 5, 6, and 10. And we'll get into the details as to where that's at and where I think the ball is at. But we're not ready to go, as far as I can see, as far as I can find, until those get addressed. Moving on to the next one of the 17, number 11, surface water infiltration. This is just a simple must during construction. No infiltration of surface water drainage into the ground is permitted without consent. Simple. Don't do it. Okay, must during construction, or a must not during construction. The next one, design materials. This one is prior to use. Prior to the use, there's the development. There should be samples of all external facing and roofing materials, and they shall be submitted to and approved in writing. I've put this under for the future because it does say prior to their use. I've seen those materials. You go through those images that I talked to you about, and they reference the type of materials you're going to be using for the facade and the siding, and how it's going to look. Like it's going to be coal structured or coal themed. They've got all of the cladding, all those particulars. I would assume that it's okay, but I haven't seen anything that checks the box. But anyway, it's for the future. The next one, landscape plan. Again, there's a landscape plan, both with the trees, both with the empty space, with some of the design components. I haven't seen it checked off, but it's for the future because the landscape plan specifically states before the development is substantially complete, that scheme has to be done. So we're good there. Number 14, before the development, and so this is going to go for the future. There has to be a scheme of net biodiversity benefit that has to be provided. Let's worry about that. We're just worried for our purposes, getting spade in the ground and getting going. Number 15, same thing. This one's for the future. Public realm management plan. That looks to me to be more along the lines of like a transit scheme. Hostile vehicle management, as they call it. That's interesting. I didn't Google what that looks like. Hostile vehicle management. Probably shouldn't joke about it. It may end up being for some sort of risk assessment. But anyway, the public realm management plan is for how are people public access to the building, away from the building, on the train, transit, traffic, and otherwise. That's the plan that has to be submitted and approved in writing. And that aligns with the actual travel plan, number 16. Which says that you actually have to have a travel plan. So you've got the public realm management, you've got the travel plan. They're sort of combined as I understand it. But both of them, for whatever our purposes, are in the future. And then finally, the noise level requirements. That's simply a must during construction. And so we're going to have to worry about not making too much noise. So that's where we're at. 17 conditions. I've now grouped them. You've got for the future. You've got the things that have to happen during construction. The resolved conditions, which 3, 6, most of it, and 8 have been dealt with. Optional ones in the future, and then we're going to focus on conditions 5, 6, and 10 if you're still with me. If you're not and you don't want to do the deep dive on those 3, just another reminder, we do watch parties for Saturday for all the men's games, Tuesdays if they play on Tuesdays, Sunday for the women. Every single game, cup, league, doesn't matter. We're into it. Join us for the watch parties where we just simply watch people. We all chat. There's a couple hundred of us, 47 countries, almost every state, almost every Canadian province and territory have been captured. Join us for those. If you like this content, hit the subscribe button. I would greatly appreciate it, as just trying to do my thing and throw out information and see if it sticks to the wall anywhere. Tell me how I'm doing in the comments below and like it if you want to. All right. Conditions 5, 6, and 10, the application for their removal came. There's 11 documents. It's in P2023-0247. Link down below to that file. And I've already shown you once, but there's the scary image again that says pending, which nobody wants to see. And what's even a little bit more concerning is since July 21st, 2023, it's been pending. So let's have a look and find out what the most recent correspondence has basically been about. And that's that, I referenced it already, that letter from Michelle Guy is the contaminated land officer, and she sends it off to Matthew Phillips, who's the planning officer responsible for the entire development at the KOP. And it's dated July 10, 2023. It's 2 pages, and it basically says, hey, this is the application for discharge of conditions 5, 6, and 10. And then I scroll down to the 3rd paragraph, and it says, it's noted there's intention to provide further details of the removal of the mound in condition 7. So there's a verification report there. It's got holes, it's got mounds, it's got things, and they're going to talk about it and what's contamination and what the assessments levels are. So nothing's magical there. But I'll state at the bottom, it says, is as detailed in my previous memo, and I can take you to that, based on NRW, that's Natural Resources Wales, recommending assessment of the site, I trust they will be providing a response in relation to controlled waters risk assessment. So Natural Resources Wales, ball is in your court. That's how I see it. Tell me I'm wrong. And it says, I note that in the 0247 applications for the discharges of 5, 6, and 10, however, as previously advised, my review of information submitted is only in regard to land contamination concerns, condition 6. The other matters are outside of my remit. So she doesn't have the authority to end up dealing with conditions 5 and 10. What does she go on and say? She says, I can recommend the discharge of conditions 1, 2, 3, but not part 4. In regard to human health risk assessment at this time, as mentioned above, comments on the controlled waters risk assessment is expected to be from Natural Resources Wales. We know where we're looking. All right. Just to bring up condition 6 here to have a look at it in its entirety so you can see the 3 that have been approved. There's a preliminary risk assessment, which has identified uses, contaminants, risk of contamination. Check. Dealt with. Done. All right. A site investigation scheme to provide information and a detailed assessment on all receptors that may be affected, including those off-site. Check. Done. Thank you, Michelle Guy and Wrexham AFC for figuring that one out. It's off the list. Number 3, the results of the site investigation and the detailed risk assessment referred to in part 2 and the remediation steps. Done. Check it off. Carrying on. The one that hasn't been approved, a verification plan providing details of the data that will be collected in order to demonstrate that the work set out in the remediation strategy are complete. That's basically, as I understand it from reading the correspondence that's there, is to ensure that there is a plan going forward that will end up satisfying other contamination issues and conditions that are there. So it's a data collection thing. To remove it, it's going to need NRW to end up talking about it, or we just have to end up satisfying that the plan is complete. That's where we sit with it, is 6-4 is still alive. All right, we were just looking at Michelle Guy's letter of July 10th, 2023. Let's jump back in time a little bit and bring up her letter of May 31st, 2023 to find out some of the source information. This is still under condition to the application to discharge conditions 5, 6, and 10 of the plan. We know what she's done with 6, but she provides some more details. She said, paragraph 3, and again, hint where I think the issue is, to avoid duplication of conditions which are similar, it is noted that the conditions applied to the planning permission are those requested by Natural Resources Wales. So back at the start of this video, I said, what's the process? Is you end up having the fire department, the safety officer, the contaminated land officer, all of them end up making statements that say, for this plan to go forward, we need to make sure that the following is taken care of. That we're not going to end up having phosphate issues because people are peeing too much. We're not going to end up having the building fall down and cause contamination, destruction. We need the plans and safety. We need the traffic to be able to move, all that sorts of stuff. These are third parties who end up saying, you need to worry about this. Wrexham County Borough adds those as a condition. Natural Resources Wales, one of those parties, and she says those conditions are those requested by Natural Resources Wales. She says, we're both Natural Resources Wales and this team being the Contaminated Land Office at Wrexham County Borough, raise concerns. The approach will normally be for Natural Resources Wales to have a focus on controlled water risk assessment, so they're responsible for water, while the Contaminated Land Officer is worried about human health risks. So consequently, on reviewing the reports and providing comments, the focus on the Contaminated Land team, her team, the Wrexham team, has been with regard to the human health risk assessment, including gas risks. She says the reports refer to details of piling, that's condition 10, infiltration permission, condition 11, other those, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And she goes, I can provide the following comments before this team can confirm whether we concur with the findings. A second revision may be necessary. So there was a study that was put out. She says, I've got questions. Here's the list of questions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm not going to get into them. They're too technical for me to assess. If somebody wants to particularize it, I would love discussion on those. Feel free to throw your comments down below. But as she goes on in the report, she says, as outlined in paragraph 10.4.1 of the report refers to the following, and she says those are sufficient to satisfy the requirements of section 6, condition 6, parts 1, 2, and 3 from the human health and gas risk perspective. On receipt of a satisfactory response to the above, I'm going to discharge them. And she does. She gets that response right away from, I believe it's Ramble was the name of the company that was responsible for the environment health report. It was. They sent their report like a week later. So they're on top of things. And she says, we agree, and this is where condition 8 is dealt with. We agree from a human health perspective that a remediation options appraisal and long-term monitoring plan, condition 8, are not necessary based on the findings of the assessment to date. There may still be a live issue for Natural Resources Wales, who's responsible for the water and not responsible for the human health risks part of it. But that's where we sit, is because when I'll bring up the picture here of the application process, is we don't see that input from Natural Resources Wales. And so as it comes to part 5, part 6.4, confirmation that 8 has been dealt with, and number 10, crickets from one organization. And if you know anybody who works there, maybe ask them if I'm wrong. I don't want to throw anybody under the bus, and I'm not suggesting that Natural Resources Wales doesn't have an important job. They exist for a reason. That's to protect the environment. It's a worthy cause. They have a job to do to make sure that development just doesn't go up without any concern or due regard for the environment, and to protect the health of the land, and the health of people. Even though that's Wrexham County Borough's remit, it's part of Natural Resources Wales' purpose. But I'm going to suggest that's where the holdup is, and we've run into them before. Let's just jump into another application here. So as a byproduct of trying to remove condition 3, there was an application November 1, 2023, that's P2023-0776. That's the second one to remove condition 3. It was met with success, and essentially what happened is the Wrexham County Borough went to Welsh Water and to Natural Resources Wales and said, hey, what's the issue with the phosphorus stuff, the phosphates? Are these sewer works going to pose a problem to the environment and with respect to your policies, and what say you? There was an email that came out November 14th, 2023 from Welsh Water, and it says, this is the third party that says, November 14th says, thank you for the below email. I can confirm that there is capacity with the public sewerage network and 5 Fords wastewater treatment works to allow for the removal of condition 3. So boom, you think, great, we've taken care of that. Condition 3 can disappear, but hold up. Somebody else steps in, and that is Natural Resources Wales, dated December 20th, 2023. There's 2 things I don't like about this email. First, it took over a month to get this response in, after the party that was responsible for doing so had already got a response out. And then they say the following. This is the second reason of the two I don't like it. It says, hey, we would advise you that you should consider the information given to you by Welsh Water. That's DCWW. I'm not going to butcher the Welsh language by trying to pronounce, well, pretty much anything because I don't have it. In any event, we would advise that you should consider the information given to you by Welsh Water, that it complies with the Natural Resources Wales special areas of conservation, and they provide a link. And it says, it is likely that there's a conclusion of no likely significant effect that can be drawn, but you should have a look at it and to make sure it's in line with our advice to planning. And it goes, but ultimately, I hate this. Ultimately, the suitability of foul drainage arrangements for the proposed development is a matter for your authority to determine. So, hey, we're not going to get involved, but what we're going to do is we're going to foist a question onto you, which if you're the Wrexham County Borough, you're going to check that box off. You're not going to leave this sit here, because if there's a problem down the road, then somebody's going to get a phone call and say, Natural Resources Wales ran up a red flag, but jeeper. Natural Resources Wales, stay in your lane. I mean, I get it. You have an obligation, you have a duty, you have oversight, but you specifically say suitability of foul drainage arrangements. That's for you to determine. They've determined it. They got a letter from Welsh Water, so why are you coming in and I don't know. Anyway, I'll leave it to you. They've got obligations, and somebody can tell me that my assessment is wrong. In any event, Natural Resources Wales comes back on December 14th. This is predating that as well, and says, hey, no problem, see below. And I don't know whether there was another email in the interim and what generated this. There's nothing below it to say what this relates to. It just says RE, so there was something, but it hasn't been made public. And it says the environmental permit for the associated wastewater treatment works has been reviewed against revised conservation objectives for water quality. And Welsh Water says, I can confirm that we've reviewed it. It says there's capacity in place to accommodate the additional wastewater. I can confirm there's capacity. And number 3, the sewer network and associated wastewater treatment works has the hydraulic capacity to deal with the connections. I can confirm. So that's why the condition was removed. The party who was responsible for making this decision made this decision. Where do we sit then at the end of the day is we've got Natural Resources Wales with their mandate to do, who have taken over a month to be able to jump on according to the public record. And maybe there's other emails that I don't have out there and they're not available, but a month to be able to make comment on something that wasn't in their sphere of influence, but just to run up a red flag, who appears to be responsible for 2 and a bit of the conditions to move forward. I haven't seen anything on them. And so my question to you is, hey, do you think I got that right? As far as the assessment goes, that we're still sitting there at conditions 5 and 10 in full need to be dealt with, and condition 6.4 has to be dealt with specific to the water issues related to potential contamination? And B, if you think that I'm right, do you know anybody or have you heard anything regarding Natural Resources Wales submitting information that requires further input from Wrexham AFC to check off those boxes? I'm going to suggest that that's where the holdup is. We've got to satisfy those obligations. Other than that, there is still the funding question. If you'll recall, January of last year, unsuccessful in the leveling up funds for the second time. We know that the Wrexham Gateway project received $25 million that was provided and earmarked for the eastern side of that project, and 17 million, and I said dollars, I meant pounds. Sorry, it's late. We know that there was 17 million quid that was transferred or to be moved from the eastern part to the western part, and that money is still earmarked to come forward. A significant portion to get this project going. The Wrexham Gateway project going to be a mixed public-private partnership. I've heard references to 50-50. It sounds like the money has been earmarked and the money is there and the money is sufficient. It's the logistics of transferring over, the practicalities, and I would suggest that what we're waiting for is 5, 6, and 10 to be dealt with. And so for that, we're waiting. And I think that's what I've heard, that there was a meeting that happened, and it was discussed that it would take 3 months once all of the approvals were finalized. I think that's where we're at. Hey, I don't know if I got it right or wrong. I've put in way too much work looking at this thing. I still love the beer wall. I still love the KOP. I would just want to get this thing off the ground. We're going to be there every Saturday for the watch parties. We're there if you're watching this one before the game for the Newport match. We'll be there for Blackburn. We'll continue to be there for the season and for the women's matches all the way through till the end of the year. We have a great time. 200, 300, almost as high as 400 concurrent viewers at one time. We've had 3,000 views. It's starting to pick up steam. We got an out-of-town scoreboard, people contributing and letting us know what's happening elsewhere, as well as thoughts on the game and adding some cool videos and some cool features and more new tricks and treats and all that sort of stuff. Another thing is I did that Who Are You series. I've kind of stepped away from it in favor of these sorts of things because I get more traction with them and it seems to be what people like. So I don't know if you want me to continue doing them, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, send in the comments and tell me to do them. If you want me to do something else other than John, I Hear You, the Academy video, it's a long process. It's coming. Let me know. I'm here learning. I'm here figuring things out. I'm reading regulations like crazy, and now I'm jumping into statutory stuff because, that's what I've done in the past, and I thought maybe I'd do it now. Not the greatest news that I wanted to hear, but it is what I've reported, and let me know I'm wrong. I'm happy to have be corrected. I'm not going to say I'm omnipotent on this. 101 different documents to scale through was an exercise. I hope I've cleaned it up a little bit, and if not, let me know about that too. Sean Driver, the Red Horde, thanks for being here. I'm out.